You know those times when someone tells you something outrageous like, hey, I shot a puppy because it was no good for hunting, and you go like, what? What did you say? And they double down in, yes, I shot a puppy because it was no good for hunting. Well, me neither. I have never seen someone doubling down on that, so this is a first time for both of us, because this woman, Kristi Noem, not only is proud of what she did, but also has just been outed as lying about meeting Kim Jong-un. In all cases, meeting Kim Jong-un is something that maybe you can make up at a family barbecue and people are just going to assume that you had one too many Cuba Libres.
So you did not meet with Kim Jong-un? That's what you're saying?
No, I've met with many world leaders. Many world leaders. I've traveled around the world.
But no! Noem, who is the governor of South Dakota, put both stories, the puppy shooting and the Kim Jong-un meeting that never happened, in the same autobiography because it seems that it was going to make it extra spicy. Sales, you know. Spicy anecdotes are important for sales. Ask Prince Harry about the Dodger stuff, but I think that one backfired. This has gotten worse to the point that she has claimed that if she goes to the White House, then Biden's dog is going to be next for an unwanted shooting practice. But how did all this begin in the first place? Well, it turns out that one of the first excerpts from her book was about her puppy Cricket. And she claims that she was not a puppy because she was 14 months old. But many dog enthusiasts online have said that wire-hair pointers are that kind of breeds that are pups until 2 years old. I am not the dog language guy, so I'm not going further into that matter, but let's say that Noem was proud of having that in the book. But what exactly happened to Cricket? Well, according to Noem, she says that the dog ruined a pheasant hunt, and I quote, she was out of her mind with excitement chasing all those birds and having the time of her life. Noem describes calling Cricket, then using an electronic collar to bring her under control, but nothing worked. And to make things worse, on the way back home, as Noem stopped to talk to a local family, Cricket escaped the truck and attacked that family's chickens, killing an undetermined number of them. According to the politician, the dog behaved, and I kid you not, this is in the book, behaved like a trained assassin. That sounds like an Adult Swim take on Paw Patrol. I would watch that. And when Noem finally grabbed Cricket, she claims that the dog whipped around to bite me. But through it all, Noem also says that Cricket was the picture of pure joy. So between the murdering rampage and the overexcited happiness, it seems that Cricket was full-on channeling Jack Torrance. But what nobody seems to understand is why did Noem say that she hated that dog? As in, literally, she hated that dog. Her words. And that she was untrainable, dangerous to anyone she came in contact with, and less than worthless, a hunting dog. So she came to the realization that she had to put her down. She took Cricket to a gravel pit and shot the dog. Now, I'm sure that the comments of this video might not be that different from the comments on any post that discusses this, especially with the stance of some farm owners who say this is the kind of decisions that you have to take every now and then. Those are not pretty decisions, but they have to be made either way. Just like this guy who says, dogs that would go into the chicken coop and eat eggs always got put down. You can't untrain that, and not everyone can afford to hire Cesar Romero to retrain their dog. Wait, what? Cesar Romero? What the? Oh, he means Cesar Millan, of course. Yes. They're busy trying to have enough livestock raised to feed the family and pay bills. But my question is, with so many people willing to adopt dogs, especially if they are still puppies, and so many of them willing to work extra hard to train them if needed, I don't think Noem would have had trouble finding someone who wanted to adopt Cricket. One single tweet, and she would have dozens of would-be adopters. But now, before we move on to the body language and behavior analysis, let's try for 1 minute that we understand the reasons why Noem thought it was a good idea to put this on the book. According to herself, she's especially proud of including this event in her memoirs because most politicians won't even dare to tell such a grueling story. And for her, it's the best example of the kind of hard decisions you have to make as a politician.
And I hope that people understand from this that what the point of this story is that most politicians, they will run from the truth. They will shy away and hide from making tough decisions. I don't do either of those.
You might agree or disagree with her point of view, but the most important thing is to keep that in mind because it will be important later in this video. But let's take a look at her body language. She's trying to guard her words and emotions, so in the next clip, make sure to look at her head movements because those can be revealing, especially when she says the words, "the truth of the story."
I hope people really do buy this book and they find out the truth of this story, because the truth of this story is that this was a working dog and it was not a puppy. It was a dog that was extremely dangerous. It had come to us from a family who had found her way too aggressive.
Well, first of all, I have a hard time not being distracted by those really asymmetric hoop earrings, and no, I don't have a clue what that means. But jokes aside, we can observe that she's trying to keep her body language cards close to her chest, moving as little as possible, keeping her voice tone steady. Maybe she's getting some help with Botox on the facial expression department. Zero emotional displays, but the most important clue here in terms of body language is the way she denies with her head the moment she says that Cricket was a working dog. I have explained this a couple times that in some Western countries, such as the United States, denying with your head can also be used as an emphasis gesture when you're affirming something. For example, when you say, "Oh, that's delicious," or "I love it," or "awesome work," you're affirming something, you want to emphasize the emotion, and you shake your head from side to side. So how do we know when the person is actually contradicting herself with her body language? Well, you compare body language to the words spoken. And in this case, the sentence was, "because the truth of the story is that this was a working dog." There's no emphasis in there. It's just a statement. A similar sentence with emphasis could have been, "because the truth of the story is that this was an amazing dog." That would justify shaking her head for emphasis. Since there are no emphasis in the sentence, then we can assume that this subtle shaking of her head from side to side is effectively denying with her head. And since what she's saying in the sentence is an affirmation, the truth of the story is that this was a working dog, then we have an actual contradiction between her words and her body language. Her body language betrayed her at that moment, and for the structure of the sentence, we can assume that no, Cricket was not considered just a working dog. And now, this is why statement analysis is so important. She also said,
It had come to us from a family who had found her way too aggressive.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You are saying that you already knew that Cricket was aggressive, right? So you already knew what you were getting into. Adopting this dangerous, highly trained assassin, and you thought it was going to work as a farm dog without the proper training? That already tells me that you are trying to subtract your responsibility from what happened. And also, the way the hunting trip is described, it's like Cricket never really knew how to hunt, that she was only having fun with the birds. Again, I'm not a dog expert, I'm just trying to make sense of Noem's words. But she just implied that Cricket required additional or special training. How could you think that without that training, she could be a good working dog and do well while hunting? And these are just 15 seconds, and those are enough to completely destroy whatever is her argument about why she did this. But wait, there's more.
With this, I just hope people will read the book, find out the truth, because this was a dangerous animal. And I had a choice between keeping my small children and other people safe or a dangerous animal, and I chose the safety of my children.
Notice that every time she can, she asks people to read the book. Very convenient for sales. And again, this is like a straw man fallacy, because nobody would ever argue that a parent wouldn't want to keep her children safe. Nobody, and I mean nobody, has arguments against that. What people have an issue with is not only having to shoot the dog when there were other options to deal with this, but also openly bragging about it not only in the book, but in live interviews. And I made sure to highlight another subtle denying with her head right before she says, "I had a choice between keeping my small children safe and other people safe." as you can see, she's not emphasizing anything here. So she denying with her head while saying that is yet another contradiction that suggests she doesn't really believe that she was keeping her small children safe from the vicious killing machine. Now, after all that you have seen, let's go back to her argument that including the cricket anecdote in the book was to illustrate the hard decisions she has had to make through the years, and that makes her a good servant of the public. But she's forgetting something, which is very important if you want to call yourself a woman of the people. The way the story is portrayed is devoid of any empathy or love for the life of an animal, especially if it's a dog, and even more if it's a puppy. I assume that she did not write her own book, but as any other celebrity or politician, she hired a ghostwriter to write it for her. How can you read the way that event was portrayed and not say, hey, you know, this sounds rather insensitive? I don't like the way this is portrayed. It's like the remorse I felt for having to shoot cricket. Because if there was remorse or regret, it was not included at all on these recollections. And that's quite dangerous. Because, all right, you are ready to make hard decisions, the kind of hard decisions that need to be made. But what if you don't have empathy? Because it's not only making the decision, but knowing who is going to be affected and how they are going to be affected. If you don't have the required empathy, as you are showing in your book yourself, that's a big red flag. You can have the most pragmatic attitude in the world, and that's great. But if you lack humanity, no, thank you. I'll pass. So even in the event that cricket had to be put down, the way it was portrayed in the book just shows that Kristi Noem is callous and lacks basic emotional intelligence. It's either that or she just didn't read her own book. And it's quite possible that she did not bother to read the book that someone else wrote for her about her own life, because that must be why there's this passage in there. I remember when I met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, I'm sure he underestimated me having no clue about my experience tearing down little tyrants. I'd been a children's pastor after all. Now, you can imagine that the interviewer would be curious about this, and that's why she asked the question, did you actually meet with Kim Jong-un? And let's see if you notice something odd in her answer to a yes or no question.
You know, as soon as this was brought to my attention, I certainly made some changes and looked at this passage. And I've met with many world leaders. I've traveled around the world. As soon as it was brought to my attention, we went forward and have made some edits.
Yes, no concrete answer. She's entirely avoiding to answer that question, which in turn is like answering the question, if you know what I mean. She didn't actually meet Kim Jong-un. But the interviewer made the right call and asked the question again. And Noem's reaction is priceless.
So you did not meet with Kim Jong-un. That's what you're saying.
You know, I've met with many world leaders. Many world leaders. I've traveled around the world.
Yeah, complete train wreck. So I have a couple questions for you. Do you think she read her own biography or not? And will her political career recover from this? It's anyone's guess. But I would love to know what you think about this in the comments. Remember to download my 100 body language tips in the description of this video. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy, and remember, much love and bliss.